In today's episode of the Morales Group Show, we're going to be talking about how to invest in tax deeds. Today, we're going to be talking about what is the difference between a tax deed and a tax lien. We're going to be talking about how tax deed investing works. We're going to be talking about um, what type of risk happen with tax deeds, what are the rewards, what type of research you need to do, and how to bid on that. To help us today, we have Mica Coleman with Leverage MDB, and she's going to be giving us all the inside scoop. So this is an episode that you want to watch to the end. Welcome to the show, Mica. How are you?
I'm doing great.
I love it. So let's jump right into it. What is a tax deed?
A tax deed is pretty much a property that goes to auction if an individual does not pay their property taxes. And there's two type of tax deeds. There's redeemable tax deeds and then there's straight tax deeds. And basically, as an investor, you can buy these properties mortgage free for the cost of the back taxes.
I love it. So, what's the difference? And this is a question that I had. What's the difference between a tax lien and a tax deed? And which one do you like better and why?
Okay, great. That's a good question. I get that asked all the time. The simple way I like to explain it is a tax deed, you get the property at the end of the auction. A tax lien, you get a piece of paper, which I call its tax lien certificate, that has a percentage that yields over time. So I like to say with tax deeds, you get a property, and tax liens, you get a certificate, and the money grows over a period of time.
So, basically, it depends on what your end goal is. If your end goal is to get the property, tax deeds. If your end goal is to potentially collect interest and not get the property, maybe tax liens. How do you find out which states are tax lien versus tax deed or
There's
counties?
well, so it's state by state. Well, let me just back up a little bit. You basically would just look into the state that you're interested in. There's 19 states that are tax deed, and the other states are tax liens. And I believe there's about four, don't quote me on this, but I believe there's about four hybrid states, which means they have tax deeds and tax liens.
I love it. And just for our viewers to know, California is one of those states where it's tax deeds, right?
Yes, it
You,
is.
you know, it's funny, Mika. I read a book on this, and then I found out that my auction was happening in the next week or two. So I actually followed it all the way through. A lot of the properties ended up paying their property taxes, but there was one that was available, and I followed it all the way through. And I went through previous auctions and I saw which property sold via tax deed, and the person actually owned the deed. And then I found a copy of the deed that they got, which was like literally titled to the property, which to me was amazing, basically, to see that.
Hmm. That's the beauty about tax deeds is you get
Oh,
the deed to the property.
got it. So, what are the risks associated with investing in tax deeds? Or what type of research do you need to do? Or what do you need to know before investing in a tax deed?
Okay, so to answer your first question, risk, I feel like tax deeds, if you purchase properly, there aren't any risk. Literally, if you do your research, it's probably one of the most guaranteed no risk proof if you know what you're buying. So I would say the only risk in tax deeds is not knowing what you're purchasing and you don't have an exit strategy. But you can get them at such a huge discount. It's a win win situation. There are redeemable states. Remember in the beginning, I said there's straight tax deeds and then there's redeemable. California is a straight tax deed state. So, like you said, once you go to the auction, if you win that bid, you get the deed to that property. However, in Texas, it's a little bit different. Once you get that deed, it's a redeemable deed. So the owner does have 6 months if it's non homestead and 2 years if it's homestead to come back and pay you. But they have to pay you what you paid for that property plus 25% every year. So
So,
it's
you're
kind
still
of
getting a good return.
Yeah, you're still getting a good return. So it's kind of like a win-win situation, in my opinion.
But what happens during those 6 months and those 2 years? Like, meaning, like, if it's a redeemable state, am I able to get an eviction against the owner if it's a homestead? And am I able to rent it out to somebody else?
Yes.
Or, yes.
Yes.
So tell us more about that.
Yes. So the property technically is yours. Um, until they come back. So you can do whatever you want. You just won't be able to recruit any of the if you try to put something in the property and if they come back, it's like you threw away your money. But what I've seen from investing in Texas, because Texas is really huge, has a lot of land. A lot of times before I go, which is your second question, some of the things you want to know before you like invest in tax deeds. One is you do want to know if the owner is still living. So, a lot of the properties that go in Texas, 9 times out of 10, the owner has been deceased. So, they're not coming back unless people are coming back from the dead, right? so, that's one of the things you need to look at if you're going to be in a redeemable state. You want to know if it's going to be homestead or non-homestead. Another thing is you want to make sure the property that you're purchasing, if there's any other liens that will not be covered underneath the tax deed sale process. um, and then what are some other things you should know? Also, you also should know like when you're going to the auction, like how to purchase it, if you have to have the funds right then and there, or if it's like 24 hours. You also want to know what type of deed. Now, I mentioned before, there are some states that are redeemable deed states, and some states are straight tax deed states. So you want to know in the redeemable states what type of deed you're getting, because in California it's a straight deed, so you're going to get a warranty deed. But in other states you don't get that. Like here in Texas, you don't get a warranty deed.
So, what are the different types of deeds? So, obviously, there's a warranty deed. What is a warranty deed and what does that mean?
It's basically warranting that the property is secure to resell and you are the official owner. Whereas a constable deed, or I can't think of the name of the other deeds. There's several different types, but basically what it means is that you have the deed to the property, but it can be redeemable, if that makes any sense. So there's no warranty behind it. It's like as is, they're not taking on any of the encumbrances. If there are any like IRS liens, or if they don't uncover anything from title, then the the liability falls on you,
Got
basically.
it. Got it. So basically, if you're in a redeemable state, probably not a good idea to invest 100,000 in a renovation if the owner's still alive, or if you feel that they may come back because there's no way to recoup that money. Basically, in other words.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Now, you mentioned that part of the homework is knowing what liens would not get wiped out through the deed sale. What are examples of those liens that would not get wiped out, basically?
So it's case by case, county by county. Every county is different. Some of them might be nuances. It could be like grass, how grass grows on a property. It could be like medical bills where they attach to the property. It could be the IRS, where sometimes the IRS attach liens. It could be a variety of liens. Sometimes it's utility liens. But it just really depends on the county. Some counties will deliver the deed free and clear, meaning that they will remove all liens, but some counties will not do that.
Got it. So you want to find that out. And how do you find out which counties remove the other liens and which ones don't?
Simply by contacting the county and asking, um, what liens should I look for, or do they remove all liens prior to the new owner?
Got it. Okay. And then what about loans? If I'm understanding correctly, the loans get wiped out if there's any loans, but there's a good chance that there isn't any loans because a lender typically has you pay for the taxes through the escrow unless it's some sort of private lender or some sort of different type of lender, basically.
Correct.
Got it. So if you're lending money and you find out that they're in default on their taxes, make sure to basically get those taxes covered. because otherwise your money is on the line as well too. Now you mentioned homestead versus non-homestead. I know what that means, but for some of our viewers that may not know what that means, what is a homestead versus not a homestead?
It's basically a document that you could file on your property that protects you from bill collectors, creditors. Anybody can get a homestead on their property, and it kind of circumvents, as far as I know, creditors and people attaching to the property.
Got it. Now, what are the reward, like, meaning like once you get the deed to the property, what does that typically look like? I mean, if it's is owner occupied, what does that look like?
It looks like you going and knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, I'm the new owner," and or "I'm your new landlord." Either one. But most of the time, uh, the tax deeds that I've purchased, the owners aren't there. It's normally a vacant or an abandoned. I normally, before I go and bid on properties, I do a Google search first to see if there's actually a physical property there first, and then I do drive-bys before I actually go and bid on a property.
Got it. What are some of the strategies? I'm imagining that when you're bidding on tax deeds, there's like rookie level strategies, there's intermediate level strategies, and there are also like advanced strategies. Can you tell us like some of the strategies that maybe not you but other investors have used or that people should be aware of when investing in tax deeds, or some of the little
There's
secrets that we don't know about, you know?
Actually, tax deeds are pretty straightforward when I'm working with my students or coaching someone.
Uh-huh.
I always ask what their end goal. One of the things that I love about tax deeds is you can literally implement whatever strategy you like after the redemption period. And there's also another thing, like you said, the ones you don't know about, which are called over the counter deeds, where you can walk directly in the county, give them a check, and the property is yours in 15 to 30 days. And I don't see them a lot in California. I know that they're not in Nevada, but here in Texas, it's you can like walk into a lot of counties and buy land for a little bit of nothing. And that's a little strategy that not a lot of people know about. It's called over the counter. But as far as different strategies you mentioned, rookies, mid level, novice, investors that have been doing it for a long time. It just really depends on what your end goal is. Some people are just looking for quick cash. They don't want to fix or flip. And then some people want all the rewards. So they're going to do the fix and flip. And then some people, they just want, a consistent cash flow. So they're going to do buy and hold. So it's pretty simple because it just depends on your budget, number one. Number two, your exit strategy, and then that's when you're going to decide what your maximum bid. So I always tell like my students, like, okay, if you are going to buy and hold, you can bid a little bit higher than a person like me who only wholesale. So I'm trying to buy these properties dirt cheap so that I can sell them to fixer upper people or people that are buy or hold. um, as opposed to like someone that's fixing and flipping. Of course, their max bid's going to be a little bit lower than someone that's buying and holding because they're looking for that flip, and then they have to have a certain so most people do 70% to ARV. So it just really depends on I would say I always tell rookies, especially that are like new in this business or they've never purchased a property, to buy low and wholesale high. And I call it wholesale, but it's really not wholesale because you're going to actually be the owner. But I like that strategy the best because the risk is low, but the reward is high. I
Mhm.
lived in California. I was a realtor there for 20 years, and I just so happened to do tax deeds. And I came to Texas and brought a piece of land for $750 and sold it for 15,000. And that's what made me move to Dallas. I was like, either everybody is asleep or not a lot of people know about this. And so I packed my bags and moved to Dallas, and I've been doing tax deeds ever since.
You know, it's crazy that like I've been in the business for 15 years and I've done flips, I've done wholesales, I've done double close, I've done all kinds of different things. And just recently, I don't know where I saw it, but for some reason, tax lien and tax deed was calling my name. And then once I started doing more research, it actually seems from my perception like a very safe way of investing in real estate because of all the things. If you know what you're doing, and it seems like it's got really good returns on it as well too. So far, I'm becoming a little bit of a fan of this. Now, bidding strategies. Like, how do you bid? Where do you bid? And what are some of the strategies as it relates to bidding?
So, like I said, my strategy, there's really no strategy. It's all about your exit strategy, right? So,
Hmm.
like, my strategy is like, okay, I know, like, let's just say a property is worth 100,000. I like to go for the minimum bids. Like, so
Hmm.
I'll talk about my strategy. So, I believe in buying several lots or several properties on the low end and getting 50% return on my money. So one of my strategies when I first started was I wasn't going to buy anything over 2 grand, but I wanted to double my money. So that was just a simple strategy. It was a safe bet. Um, I already had a list of investors from going to auction, but I actually end up buying them for 2,000 or less and actually quadrupling my money.
Hmm.
But I started really simple and modest because I was new, even though like yourself, I've been investing for 20 years and I lost my shirt in 2008, 2009. I lost everything. I had like houses all over. And I was like, if I ever was to do investing again, I'm not going to do mortgages. Like, I want to be able to invest in properties where I never have to look at a mortgage and be stressed out. So that's how I came about tax deeds because it was a strategy for me where I can own property free and clear. And it's also a good tax incentive. I could write properties that I don't sell. Like there's a few that I have, like triplexes I've bought for like 10 grand, and I just write them off for depreciation every year.
It's awesome, and then you get to keep them as well too. Um,
Absolutely.
what are some of the fees that are associated, like whenever you buy a property at a tax deed?
And there is no fees. It's whatever it is. So, like, if the minimum bid starts at 500 and you win that bid and it's 50,000, that's the cost, 50,000. However, if you are doing online bidding, which California has a lot of them, and bid for assets for those that are interested in doing tax deeds, that's a good resource. A lot of the West Coast properties are on bid for assets. And, you know, if you want to dibble and dabble and look into that, that would be a good resource to start. Um, but I feel like I forgot the question. What were we talking about?
We were just talking about fees, and
Oh, fees.
the reason I
That's right.
ask is I did go on bid for assets, and I not sure if they had like a buyer premium or they had some sort of like fees associated with it.
That's where I was going. Yes. So for bid for assets, for example, a lot of the online will have you deposit a minimum bid fee, and they do have fees. It just really depends on the county. So yeah, that's where I was going with that. So like for bid for assets or most online auctions do have a fee, but they vary. They vary from just like you have to have like a minimum amount, and then sometimes they have bid premiums and sometimes they don't. It just really depends on the county. Like I think Butte County, like the minimum you had to deposit was 500, but of course, like San Diego, I think it was like a minimum of 5,000. So it just
Got
really
it.
depends on the county.
Got it. Okay. Now, let's say a property has redemption rights and you want to flip that property because it has redemption rights. Does that mean that you can't resell it during that waiting period, or can you actually resell it with somebody else, assuming the redemption?
So that's a loaded question. And as an investor, as you know, there's always more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah. And that's what I'm looking
So,
to find out, the cat skinning strategies.
right. So technically, quote unquote, no. But if you actually put it in a business, you could sell the corporation to someone underneath the redemption. So you're not actually selling the property, but you're selling the corporation, which that corporation is under the property.
What are the pros and cons of doing it that way?
So the pros is that you could get rid of it really quick and recoup your money. and you're done with it. The cons is that the event that it comes back, depending upon whatever you sold that property for, um, they may lose out to whoever you sell it to if that person comes back and redeem it within, you know, depending on that state, their redemption period. So it may be like that person that's owning it may lose out because they may have gave you more money than what the person's going to redeem it for, if that makes any sense.
Really? So they're basically so there's some risk to the end buyer basically of doing it that way. What would
Yeah.
you do in that situation if you sold it to them? Would you refund the money back? Like, or is it like, hey, look, you knew of this risk going into it and that was part of the deal, basically?
It's circumstantial.
Circumstantial. So it could go either way, basically.
It could go either way. Um, I did. So this is an interesting thing. I was going in a partnership with someone. Luckily, I didn't. But the interesting thing about that, and the reason why I say circumstantial, is because the person was trying to come back, but they didn't have all the funds. And so I was asking, I ended up deeding myself off because I was like, I don't even want to deal with this headache. But what was interesting was as I was helping, because I went in partnership with someone that was new to this, and they were like, "Can you just go on it with me? Can we do it together? I'm scared." So I was like, "Yeah." And then it became a doozy. And so in order to help them, I was like, "Okay, let me find out what are the ramifications." What's interesting about redeemable states, and this is only like just so happened this county. I said, "What if we don't redeem the property? Like, what are the ramifications?" And they were like, well, we don't really have any protocol for it. But this is Texas. There's a lot of hick counties. And I was like, wow. So it was interesting. The person didn't come up with all the money. So my a coaching client slash partner end up keeping the property. But I was like, okay, what would happen if he tried to come back and we don't want to give it to him? Because I told him not to fix it. I told him not to do anything. He had started doing stuff. And I think we were like in the fifth month. But anyway, I found out that it's kind of like a he said, she said. That county, that particular county was like, well, we don't really have protocol. Because I was like, what if we don't?
What can they do about it, basically? It's going to be a lawsuit, basically, at that point, potential litigation.
Yeah, but if he didn't have the money to cover his taxes, he's not going to afford an attorney to fight us for 1 month of his redemption.
Got it.
So,
It's so interesting that because there basically like additional risk associated with the redemption states. What does the actual redemption process look like for a homeowner? Like, let's say that I lost my property to a tax deed, and let's say there's a 6 month redemption period. Is it literally as simple as giving you the amount plus the potential interest on the property, and I get the property back? What does that process look like? If you have any insight on that,
so basically, from what I've been told, and this is only one county because I've never all my properties. I've been blessed that the owners were
redemption.
dead, so I didn't have to worry about them coming back from the dead. Um, so basically, what I was told at this one particular county, and every county has their own process. So I think that's what scares a lot of people because if you do it in one county, that doesn't mean it's going to be the same for others. And she was saying if the owner went down to the county, they would pay the county, and then the county would in turn reverse the deed.
Got
And
it.
then the county would cut me a check.
Got it. So basically, that's some of the risk associated. So let me ask you this: is this even a strategy? This is what I was thinking. I've got a list of, let's say, 100 tax deeds, and I look up the property tax record to see who the owner is, and then I look at obituaries and see if that owner is potentially dead. If I see that they're dead, likely a good one to bid on. Is that a strategy at all? Is that something that people do in this
Yeah,
field?
that. Mm-hmm.
That is.
Yes, a lot. Only in Texas, too, by the way, you can get a loan to pay your taxes. So some people know about it, but some people don't. But that's another strategy. Some people they'll look at the list that's going to auction and they'll try to go find the owner and pay them out before it goes to the auction. I tried that a few times. It wasn't working for me. It was just so much easier to just go and bid at the auction.
At the auction.
Hmm.
Got it. So some people try to do that. All right, got it. You said the word doozy. It turned out to be a doozy. Give us some examples of doozies. And what do you mean by a doozy?
Like I said, like a doozy is like when the owner tries to come back and you have to try to like negotiate with them or try to get them to like go away. That could be a doozy in a redemption state. Another doozy. Now, I'm in real estate. I've been a real estate agent for 20 years, so like I know how to research properties. I look up coordinates, everything. So I went to this auction in Oklahoma. It was like a 4-day auction, and people were literally buying lakes, which you can't do anything with, or they were buying what do you call that when the landlocked, they were buying landlocked property, so it's kind of like
You're in the middle of
that's
nowhere. Yeah,
yeah, like
yeah.
you can't do anything with
Unless you
it.
fly in on a helicopter every
Right.
single time.
So that could be doozies, and I never forget this one guy was like crying. It wasn't funny, but it was funny because I'm like, you didn't look it like you. Everybody has a cell phone, just Google it. But like I think people get into that, bidding, and properties are so cheap they just want to get something and grab something, and they don't do their due diligence. So I always encourage my students or anybody that's new, do your due diligence, and there really will not be any risk. Like I don't buy anything unless I know what the ARV is going to be, and also too if I have an end user, so like meaning an end buyer. So like for example, I'm going to go to an auction on Tuesday. All the opening bids are 500 their land. I have truck drivers that want to park their 18 wheelers there. They told me their price. They're willing to pay me 20 or 30 grand. The opening bid is 500. I guarantee you I'm going to get them for like 1,000 or less.
Got it. So
And
you
I'll
already
still
have the end
upsell
buyer.
them. Mm-hmm.
What are other examples of things you don't buy and why? So I know you obviously you don't buy landlocked. So for our viewers that don't know what that is a property that doesn't have access. Basically, it's a property sandwiched in between other properties where you don't have an easement or a road to get to the property. Basically, so you're basically buying a property with no access, which basically hurts the value tremendously. Which is probably the reason it went into a tax deed because the previous owner said, "Why am I paying taxes on this property where I can't even access it?" Basically.
Right.
What are other examples of properties you don't buy?
So I don't buy properties that need demolition
Hmm.
of a house. I don't buy properties where there's a lot of trees, which means you got to include that cost. Like I'm pretty like you, I've done every investment strategy there is under the sun, and I'm like, I want low risk, high rewards. So I stay away from anything that's going to cost me more than what I've paid for the property. So that's why I drive by them. I look at them because that's going to determine what my maximum value is going to be. I mean, my maximum bid and what I can sell it for. Because all those things, come into play. Another thing is actually I have to call the county because I've never heard of this. I mean, it's like 5 acres is going for like $500, and so I looked up the zoning. So that's another thing, right? And like 2 of the acres is residential and the other three are like nature pasteurized or something, nature
Hmm.
pasture. So I'm like, I never heard of that before, so I'm like, I need to find out because what does that mean? So I may buy that or I may not, but I need to find out what that zoning means. Can I convert it? So I won't buy properties where they have like if they have zoning that no one can do anything with it. So you do definitely want to check the zoning of a property.
Got it. So zoning, landlocked, property that needs a lot of um, tree
Tree.
removal. What else? So you're looking all of this. Where are you looking all this up? Are you looking at a realtor specific website like the MLS? Are you looking at a GIS system? Where can people do the research and what are some other tricks and tips that they can utilize for research?
So I always start with the tax assessor's office because oftentimes they do have the GIS map. They also have what is that they call on the county website? It's not GIS, it's something else.
Realist,
No,
tax.
it's always on. I don't use like you could use like if you're a realtor, you can use like Realist to like look up the zoning. But as far as like physically seeing the property and the zoning for the county, I always start at the tax assessors, because oftentimes they have a GIS map where you can actually see it from bird's eye, and then you can also see it physically. I also look on Google Maps to see like, what it is before I drive by it. Funny story. I was living in California at the time, and I was like, I'm getting on the plane and I'm going to come and I'm going to buy this fourplex. So I saw this, the auction, it was like 10 grand was the, minimum bid. And how you decide if the value, of course, you probably would want to contact a realtor or use Redfin or Zillow. I think those are like conservative numbers. If you don't have access to, MLS or to a realtor, you can use those as conservative numbers. Anyway, make a long story short, I was like 10 grand. I was like, even if this goes to 100 grand, a fourplex is, that's pretty decent. So I fly all the way here, and guess what?
It burned. It was
There
burned. It was just no fourplex there anymore.
was no fourplex, but on the Google Maps, there was a fourplex there,
Got it.
and it said it on the description. But I flew all the way to Dallas to find out that it was just dirt.
Got it. Which is a good thing. So that's part of the research process as well, too. If you can't do it, sending somebody to basically walk the property or walk the lot to make sure that there's actually something there. If somebody bidded on that, that would have been another story of somebody else crying, basically, because if they bid $100,000 for that fourplex. And sometimes it's crazy because you're bidding on something thinking that you're getting a great deal, but somebody who actually did the research is almost like, don't do it. I went to an auction a long time ago, like a foreclosure auction, and
Mhm.
the people there are sharks. They were letting somebody else bid on a second trust deed and almost bidding against him to drive him up so that he would never come back. When I saw that, I'm like, this is a like dog eat dog type of world. It was like, man, they're like, if this guy has a negative experience, he won't ever come back. And I was like, this is crazy. So you point proven, you have to do your research because obviously there are things that could happen. This is just a personal thing that I wanted to find out. You said one of the guys was crying. What mistake did he made that made him cry, if you remember at all?
Well, he like paid like 10 grand for a lake. Like, what are you going to do with the lake? He thought he was getting land, and it was like a lake, like in the middle
Like
of
in the
nowhere.
middle of the lake, or like the whole lake, or just
It was like the whole lake. Maybe there was land before, but it wasn't. But like when you pull it up, like he was like the laugh of the whole auction, and it was sad, but it's also too like, and it probably was like, that was probably all he had.
damn,
Probably
that's crazy.
he thought he was winning big, and mm-mm,
Didn't work out that way. Yeah, the
didn't
research.
work
So
out
probably
that way.
should have driven by. Good. Okay. So I've enjoyed this interview. If somebody wants to learn from you, somebody wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that? And is there any final thoughts on tax deed investing?
So how anyone could get a hold of me, I am on IG at I am M Coleman. Once again, that's I am M Coleman. And if they want to know more about learning more about overages, I do have a YouTube channel. It's called Tax Deed and Overage Education, and you'll see my logo, which is leverage. Or they can just go to www.leveragemdb.com. Once again, that's www.leveragemdb.com.
Got it. Mica, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. For our viewers out there, if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you feel that this episode would help somebody, make sure to hit the share button. Mica, thank you once again. I've enjoyed this. And to our viewers, until next time.